Hello and welcome back to another episode. Indeed, welcome to the third spooky tale I have for you this October. Today, I want to share with you my introduction to ghosts and the very specific end point of this introduction that was actually quite horrifying, and it left me haunted, you might say, by some particularly grim and unnerving imagery. And it all came out of relatively innocent beginnings. As children, we all hear ghost stories, and of course the first image of ghosts that we're exposed to are those sheets with eye holes cut in them, the ooh type ghost.
This is so corny. Is this what we've been reduced to, sheets?
Think of them as death shrouds, and the moaning is important. Really moan.
Which is actually quite a friendly face for the departed, for the revenant spirits wandering our plane of existence. It's childlike and full of a certain amount of wonder. But often these stories are told to children in a very particular context, namely with two happy, healthy parents at home. And the same couldn't be said for me, I'm afraid. You see, my dad died when I was 5, and my mum often wasn't very happy at all at home. And so when I first started hearing ghost stories as a toddler, and as I grew, towards my 8th birthday, these stories were rippling with a potential that simply wasn't there for my friends. None of them was concerned that maybe their dad was out there, for example, waiting to haunt them, or at the very least bump into them in the night around any dark corner. Now, I've since come to find a sort of dark glee in the fact that I had that little spice of fear added to these stories. But at the time it was extremely serious, and it very, very deeply concerned me. The first ghost story I ever heard was from my Gran. Not my Nan, whose keys we heard about last time, but my Gran, my mum's mum. And she one afternoon sat me down, and it was around about this time of year, and she suddenly started talking to me about a holiday that she went on with my granddad. I didn't know what she was telling me this for, but it became clear that this was a ghost story. That they had pulled up into a campsite in a small camper van, a very small camper van. In fact, if I can find a picture of the type of model, then I will, and put it up on screen. And in this particular little camper van, there's a sort of a kitchen and bedding area in one, and it meant that when you were lying in bed, you were in a very small enclosed space, but your feet essentially were at the door, right at the back door of the space. And she described to me in delicious detail, in hindsight, the apparition that greeted her one night when she awoke to go to the loo. It was cold, and she suddenly felt like she needed to heed the call of nature. And she woke up and looked down, expecting to see her feet, but she didn't see her feet. What she saw was a petticoat, a delicate floating garment in the dark. And she realised that she can't be seeing it because it's dark. Why would she be able to see it? And then it dawned upon her that this petticoat was glowing. And as she sort of looked up and down, she noticed that the garment didn't really end in any way that she expected it to. It seemed to go sort of through her legs, and as she went up to where she expected there to be a head, there wasn't really a head. There was a sort of as she described it, as a shadowy shape, which then reached out towards her, and in an instant was gone. She said that she was so scared she suddenly didn't need the loo and went back to sleep, and just tried to forget that she ever saw it. But it always stuck with her, and actually her rendition of the tale stuck with me. Just imagine me sort of shivering, with a glass of Ribena or something, listening to this tale from this old lady. And this sort of coincided with, at the time, I remember we'd just moved. We just had to move to a new school, for reasons that I won't go into here. And in this new school, the rumours started to circulate. This new boy, me, doesn't have a dad. His dad is dead. And so, of course, some of the older boys thought it would be funny to bring this up with me. And I was in the upper end of school at that point. I was basically in year 5, year 6. But some of the boys who were established, had been there all their lives, one day approached me in the cloakroom and said, "Have you ever heard of a Ouija board?" And I hadn't really heard of a Ouija board. I'd had quite a sheltered and quite an isolated childhood up until then. And I said, "No, what's that?" And they pulled out what was actually a piece of card that they'd written what they thought a Ouija board looked like. But they said, "This is a Ouija board," and they started to describe what happens when you have a Ouija board, and how the planchette moves around the board and the dead will speak to you. They will spell out their names, yes, no, goodbye, this kind of thing. The classic Ouija board stuff. And they said, "We can talk to your dad. Let's do that. Shall we talk to your dad? Let's do that, shall we? We'll do that tomorrow." And the next day, one of the boys brought in a Ouija board, and at lunchtime they closed off the area. They invited me in, closed all the curtains and all this kind of thing, and they ostensibly tried to contact my dad. And what was interesting is I remember not being so much scared at the prospect of that. I was just curious. I was like, "Is this?" It was as if someone had introduced me to a phone book. Someone had just said, "Well, here's a phone book. Here are some numbers. Let's call your dad." I was like, "Okay," and I think they were trying to scare me, but my genuine curiosity meant that I wasn't really scared. The planchette moved around. Obviously, they didn't have a clue about me or my life or my family or anything, so there was nothing significant coming out of the movement of the board. And when it was clear that I was more impatient than terrified, they kind of gave up and went, "Oh, the ghost is gone," and that the séance was over. But slowly it dawned upon me as the day went on what they'd tried to do and what the possibilities of that might be. And I remember when I went home that night, Mum was setting up. I think we were more or less just moving into a house at the time. Mum was setting up the living room, and I sort of said to her, "Have you considered a Ouija board to talk to Dad?" At which point she screamed at me. She said, "No, no, no!" Really sort of scrunched face. She was horrified at the prospect of using a Ouija board to try and contact her dead husband, or indeed my dead father. And she said, "Never do that. Promise me you'll never do that. Never do that," she said. And I was like, "Okay, right, sorry. It's okay, right." And again, my curiosity was then confusion, mixed, of course, with the context of the ghost story that my Gran had told me. And that night I had such an incredibly vivid dream that haunts me now. I still can't even think about this without being a bit upset. In so much as I went to bed that night and I dreamt that I was fast asleep, and then in the middle of the night the wheelie bins outside, brand new wheelie bins I might add, the street had just got wheelie bins. The wheelie bins outside were clattering about. The lids were flapping and flopping as if it was a windy night. And in my dream, I sort of opened the window, only to find that the air is still. There is no wind, and the moon is quite full, but there is quite a lot of cloud cover as well. So everything's sort of indistinct down below, out the back of the house where the bins are. And in my dream, the next thing I see is a wheelie bin move towards the wall below the window where I'm looking out of. I'm peering down towards the bin, and suddenly out of the bin comes a dark shape, an indistinct shape, much like what my Gran described, except I had sort of put squiggles and scratches on it. It was like a scratched piece of I don't know, of plastic or a photograph or something, but it was moving like TV static. It's horrible to think about. And I don't know how I knew it was looking at me in the dream, because it had no distinct features. It didn't really have limbs. It just kind of came out of the bin and sort of knocked it over. The bin went flying, and it just was just staring up at me, sort of, like this kind of thing. And instantly I knew that was my dad in the dream. I knew that was the ghost of my dad, and I was so scared. I mean, we talked last time about the barrel dream being scary. This one, I was so scared I didn't scream. I didn't wake up screaming. I just woke up, and I just remember curling up into a ball. I didn't want to open my eyes. I put my head underneath a pillow. I put my head right up against the wall, the mattress and the wall, and I just remember repeating over and over again, "Don't do that to me, Dad. Don't do that to me, Dad. Please don't do that to me." In so much as don't appear to me like that. Please, whatever you do. And actually, to be honest, I would say that now. If there is any possibility of a dead loved one who I know appearing to me, don't do that to me, please, because that was horrible. A horrible dream, but it was so vivid, and frankly, I don't think I've seen a horror movie top it. I don't think I've seen a scary film get to that particular visceral, tailored image of what that experience would be like. It was tailored for me by my own psyche. I'm my own best horror movie director, apparently. But there's that mantra: "Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me, Dad. Please don't do that to me." I just rocked back and forth a little bit, scrunched up in a ball against the wall, until it started to get light outside, and I felt then that it was safe to maybe have a look down into the yard and see what was actually going on outside. It's such an intense scare that I had that it still chills me to the bone just to think about it now, and hence I'm sharing it with you as we approach Halloween. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed these 3 tales in October. I've definitely enjoyed bringing them back into the forefront of my mind, because they sort of have settled somewhat in my psyche. They are part of me, and they're part of how I think about spooky things in this time of year. But it's been a real pleasure really remembering and basking in these stories once more. So thanks for listening, and hopefully these have been interesting. Next week I hope to do a live stream or 2, depends on how the Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth live stream goes, and I'm considering on Halloween Eve, so on Friday, doing a long live stream of either Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 7. Which would you rather see? I'll leave that to you guys. In fact, I'll put it on as a question on the Facebook page and on Twitter, but also in the comments below. Let me know. Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 7. Maybe a 6-hour live stream. We'll see. We'll see what happens on Friday the 30th of October. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.